Hi there. Thanks for tuning in and coming to see how I'm doing. It's been a couple of months, and I wanted to share with you a little bit about the history of my family and what's going on. So this is a personal vlog, video log. About 2.5 months ago, around May 20th, I'm having a hard time finding the right words. On May 20th of this year, I got a call from my first cousin, Katerina Zaharoff, and she said to me that they found that she has cancer in the pancreas, and she wanted to make sure that she told us in the United States because she wanted us to give an opportunity to either go see her or if something were to happen, or actually when it happens, we weren't questioning why didn't anyone tell us. And I think that being told that I was in denial. I told my mother, you know what, I'll go maybe in August, September. And my cousin ended up saying, I think you might want to come sooner because it's going to deteriorate very quickly. And I don't know, I was in denial maybe. And so 8 days later, I booked a ticket, and my sister did in New York, and we all flew to Athens for a weekend, and we were in the hospital, and I stayed with my grandmother most of the time. It was good to see my grandmother. When we walked into the room, my sister Katrina and I surprised her. So when I walked into the hospital room, my grandmother, she's a tiny lady, maybe 5'7", and she was in a ball covered, and she was just saying, I'm not well. And I walk into the room, and there's my sister and I, and that whole weekend she had perked up, and she just loved us being there. Her brain was razor sharp. It was her body that was deteriorating. And it was nice to just spend those 3 days with her. And when he said goodbye, she knew it was the last time I would see her. And I knew it too. I had hoped not. So my grandmother was much younger than one would expect for a grandmother. And so she loved to walk. She loved being outside. She loved to travel. She loved people. She was a very social person, and she loved showing off her grandchildren. And then over the course of the 2 months since we left, it really went down here fairly quickly, and phone calls to her started becoming incoherent, and she would she knew what was happening. She knew who was calling her, and she kept repeating over and over again, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I was telling I was telling her, que cosa agapao, and I love you too. It was around this past week, I spoke to my cousin, and she said that this was probably the end coming. She had so much life in her that she really did not want to die. And I have so many things racing through my head. I have such a headache. So let me tell you a little bit of history. My mother's mother passed away when my mother was 4 years old, and she was shipped to Israel with her brother. Were put on a boat and shipped to meet their aunt. And imagine at that age. And so on the deathbed of my grandmother, she was saying, who's going to marry my daughter? Another woman is going to marry my daughter. And my grandfather made a promise saying that he would not remarry until my mother was married, which the dramatics of, very dramatic actually. And my mother was married off. So what happens, of course, is my mother gets married to my father at age 14. And it's hard to believe, but that's what happened. And then my grandfather married my grandmother, who was actually my step-grandmother. And her name was Gethsemane, which is the Gethsemane, which is, I think, the rock where the crosses were at, Gethsemane, right? Is that the area or the mountain? So her name was Gethsemane, or Nitsa, Nitsa for short. Yaya Nitsa, we would call her, Grandma Nitsa. So she was my father's age. She was 20 years younger than my grandfather, and I'll show a picture here. And so it was always the grandmother that I always knew. She was a powerhouse. And so my mother would send us, the day after school ended to the day before school started. Every summer we would go to Greece with my sister. So it would be the two youngest ones, my sister and myself. We were sent to Greece. And so it was with my grandparents, but it was my grandmother that I was very close to. I think I was her favorite. She was very proud of presenting herself and how she spoke and everything. She wanted to be, well, she was a lady. She loved everyone as if they were their real grandchildren. So she really taught me a lot. And I mean, she was the one that if we were in line at a bank and someone cut in, she would be the first one, even if the line was 30 people. She would open her mouth and say, "Excuse me, the line's back there." My grandmother really wanted things to be fair. And one of her things was, that isn't the right thing to do, George. And I think a big chunk of that rings in my head when making decisions or actions of what is the right thing to do. And my mother traveled a lot. My mother would go to Greece once a month, and would take my grandmother with as well. There was one place that she always wanted to go, and that was Hong Kong. And I remember when I first went in 1994, I took a picture and I sent it to her, and she was just so thrilled. I'm happy that I went with my sister and we were able to show her love. When I left, she turned to one of my aunts, and she had never said this before, ever. You know, I think when you're about to pass away, you think about your legacy, you think about what you're leaving behind and if you made any mark. And she said to my aunt, she said, "I never had any children of my own, but I love these children like they're mine, and they love me." And I think that us going to see her just for the sole purpose of being with her, I'm just so happy. And if anyone is listening and they have a sick relative, a sick friend, it's okay to go and be there, and okay, it's uncomfortable. We don't know the right words to say, but the presence, just being there, we don't know how we could touch people, especially at the end of their lives, which must be very scary. And so she was surrounded by my aunts and my relatives when she passed. And she kept saying, "I love you," over and over again. It's just so awful. Do you know, I find myself panicking. I find myself with a pain when I think about my grandmother was always there. And I have to believe that many of you that have lost their grandparents, their parents, you know, knowing that they're there is like a safety net. You know, Greece was connected to my grandparents, to my grandmother. She was always, I would pop in and surprise her, and she would always say, Levedoniemu, meaning, I mean, whenever she'd say me Levedoniemu, and it would be my handsome one. And I'll never hear that again, and it's just hard. It's hard to wrap my brain around all of that. It's not there anymore. And when I think about that, I get panicked. I panic and I get anxiety. I don't know what to say about death. I don't know. And we're here for such a short period of time. She didn't want to die. She was very aware of what was happening. It was just her body that was deteriorating, but her brain was sharp. And I know I struggle with the religion that I was brought up in, which is a very strict Eastern Orthodox religion of fire and brimstone, versus the exposure that I've had to so many other thoughts and religions. You know, and I came across something that was interesting, saying that wherever we were before we were this, we were okay with. And when we die, we're just going back to where we came from. That we're looking at this as if this is our home, but it really isn't. And that's interesting. And I know my grandmother has gone back to where she came from, and I know that we're all going to go back to where we came from. My God. I love you, Giagia. I miss you. Oh my God, it's like a pain knowing that. That's all. I just miss her. Thanks for being there. Thanks for listening. I love you.